We're in the trophy room of the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia in Muscaters Bay in Sydney with Roger Hickman, who is the owner, skipper of the winner of the 2014 Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race and Wild Rose. Now, Roger, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you.
And tell us about the boat first off.
Well, Wild Oats, or Wild Rose as we call it now, was originally built by Bob Oakley for the 1985 Admiral's Cup trials. And John McConaughey built the boat. It was beautifully built, and I think Bob left him an open cheque while he went off and did some sailing in Sardinia. I was lucky enough to get on the boat subsequent to that, and it was just a magnificent boat for its time. You'd say it's well ahead of its time. But, you know, stripped out, clean, tidy, and very IOR-ish, IOR shape. So then I sailed with Bob for 2 or 3 years on it. It lay idle for a couple of years, and then Bob and I negotiated a terrific deal for me. And then not only did he, after the first half payment, I said, look, can you give us 6 months to get the next? And he said, look, Roger, don't worry about it. You have the boat and enjoy it. So we did, and we have. We've done very little to it. About 15 years ago, the inline spreader rig fell out, and didn't have any money, and I wanted 80 grand to put a new one in. So I spoke to David Lyons, who was a good friend of mine, a fellow Tasmanian and a good designer, great designer, and we put a sweepback spreader in, sweepback spreader rig, and the cheapest and the best on the market was Johnny Denton was building the Sydney 38 masts, and there was lots of sales available because the Sydney 38 class was flourishing at the time. And that's about the only change we have made with the mast. Obviously we had to cut the mainsail down, the Sydney 38 mainsail, far 40 jibs. I was lucky enough to sail with Lang Walker and Matt Allen and a few guys that had quite a few far 40s, and so they gave me some jibs and some spinnakers, so I was pretty lucky. And then last year, Andrew Buckland, a really good friend of mine and a bit of a yachty mentor of many people, said, Hicko, you've got to put bigger spinnakers on that. You'll never win an Australian championship. You'll never win the Hobart unless you put bigger spinnakers. So we did. So that's about it.
What about the keel? Have you done anything with the keel?
No, the keel is, apart from last year, we took it to Noakes Boatyard, and Noakes are very, very good, and they did a full job on the bottom. I can't fess up to this, and I shouldn't, but we'd never taken the anti-fouling back to the bare bones, back to the stripped it all back since I got it from Bob. So we're looking at about 26 years of anti-foul on, a bit off, bit on, bit off, bit on, bit off, and it started to flake and looked a bit shoddy. And so Sean Langman was very kind and came up with the technical advice, because we didn't want to sandblast it, he wanted to soda blast it. So Sean put his head together and we came up with a plan, and look, in one sense it cost an arm and a leg, but I know that it was very reasonably priced. So that was the big thing. So the bottom was beautifully fair and new, and with the bigger spinnakers came longer spinnaker poles. And another good friend of mine, Ian Short, we were having a few drinks after the Southport race, and he was sailing in a Beneteau and they'd beaten us. He said, here you go, you'll do no good until you get a code 0. So I had Bucko saying you won't do better until you get bigger spinnakers, or Shorty, you ain't got a code 0. And then lo and behold, we won. We were very lucky in a close battle. We won the Australian Audi Australian IRC Championships, and the proud owners, or gift or prize, was a new Audi spinnaker. So North's did that deal with Audi, and so they made us a beautiful big new spinnaker, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, a few more for the wardrobe. And so for this year's Rolex Sydney to Hobart, the 70th, I think that Bucko's bigger spinnakers, Sean Langman's better hull, and Ian Short's code 0 got us across the line with a little bit of help from us.
Talking about help, what about the crew now? You had a fairly augmented crew, didn't you?
Well, Gordon Bray at the prize giving said that we were an eclectic bunch. Now, at the time, I didn't really appreciate what an eclectic bunch meant, and so a few of us took a bit of umbrage to that. We thought, what does he mean? But in actual fact, it was a real compliment. We've taken it as a compliment, and Gordon's just a wonderful orator and a supporter of the sport. And what it meant was we'd come from all different walks of life, really. I guess most of us were all Caucasian, although we did have people from other countries, other nationalities on board. But They're a great crew, and the crew for Wild Rose this year has been it's been an evolutionary thing for many, many years. I made the comment when we got to Hobart that Peter Inchbold, Peter Inchbold's the right-hand man, he's the linchpin, he's the sort of guy that if you didn't have, you could not possibly do well. Pete's been with me on the Wild Rose, he was sailing with Matt Allen on Ichiban, he sailed with us with the Russians and with Chris Dare on Flirt and on Vamp, and he also sailed with Alan Bridie on Limit. So Pete and I collectively have done 66 Sydney to Hobarts. Now that was before we actually got there this time, so it might be 68 now. He's been there a long time and he's a wonderful sailor, old school, IOR, very capable. And so with Pete, and from the rest it flows. Andrew Scott's been with me for 8 or 9 years. Daniel Morrow off and on for the last 14 years, far 40s. On Limit, on Vamp, on Chris Dare's Flirt, Matt Allen's Ichiban. The list goes on. Daniel Williams has been sailing with me in the Etchells. He sails within the Dragons. This is his 5th Sydney Hobart. Jennifer Wells, the navigator. She's a great girl. She's picked up the navigating, that whole mystique of expedition and weather and grip files, and it's all way above my head. But she understands it and does a great job, and those lengthy skids, and they're great, we need them, but she does well with that. So this was her 5th year as well. Jackie White was her 4th year. Antonia Fongy came back from America. It was the 3rd Sydney Hobart she'd done with us. Dr. Phil Warburton, old Doc, he's done 10 or 12 Sydney Hobarts and last 5 with us on the Wild Rose. So a lot of depth there, a lot of depth. And there's probably 1 or 2 more. Kim Kitelby, Kim sailed Sydney 38s at a very high level. I think they might have won a Nationals in Sydney 38s. She comes to us with a lot of experience, but it was her 4th Sydney Hobart. So this is all on the same boat with the same crew. And then, of course, you've got Andrew Scott's daughter, who's a young 17-year-old when she started sailing and from Queensland. And I said, look, when you turn 18, you can do the race. And she said, oh, wow. So she was pretty stoked. And then, of course, my brother Andrew and my sister Lisa, my brothers, we've been off and on sailing in Sailing South, and he'll do Airlie Beach, but he's never done a Sydney Hobart. And Sam hadn't, obviously. And Lisa, my sister, she was a good international cadet sailor, joined the Royal Navy, got shot at in the Gulf, so she did her time there, and she's a very successful kite surfer, and so it was her first Sydney Hobart too. So to have the family was just really wonderful. Sam, a first tripper, so 3 first trippers, but the depth of the crew. And the crew, we've all done Blue Water. We were privileged to win Blue Water Division 2 this year. We won Blue Water overall last year. So it really makes it pleasant. It really makes it easy. They know the sails, they know the boat, they know how the toilet works, they know how the galley works, they know how I work, and they know how the bunks work. So it really does make a huge difference because you can relax and get on with the job of trying to go boat racing, and you're not being second-guessed, or you're not having arguments about or teaching people the basics. And so it's really good. Great crew, and this one was really special for them because we're all Corinthians. We entered that Corinthian division. We thought that the Mick York Trophy was something that would be just wonderful. Maybe we upstaged that a little bit. The George Adams Tattersalls Trophy. Being Tasmanian, knowing all about George Adams, and Tattersalls was a big name in Tassie, and it was just, fantastic. And I was just thinking earlier, when I left, we lived next door to the CEO, I don't think they called him CEOs, Managing Director of Caltex, when Caltex sponsored the race, and my uncle did it when Ampol, and now we're privileged to have Rolex and many, many, many sponsors in between. It's just fantastic. But the crew, without a good crew and a good boat, you've got a long way to go.
So how did you work up to the start of the race? What did you do? Did you do any races beforehand? Or?
Yeah, look, the CYCA run a Blue Water series, and that's primarily what we've been doing. I guess with with an extended family of some 18 or 20 people, we've got, you've got funerals, you've got weddings, you've got parties, you've got an amazing amount of things that have got to happen. So to get a regular crew every weekend, it would be just impossible. Well, not impossible, but a difficult task. So on the Wild Rose, we sort of do all the blue water, and that's something we're passionate about. And we also do the Australian IRC Championships with the Audi Regatta. We do Port Stephens religiously. We did Lord Howe Island religiously. We've been to Geelong. So the boat's been campaigned since I was sailing with Alan Bryody in Limit, and then when we sort of moved on and did other things, I sort of got back into the Wild Rose because I really wanted to get back into the Etchells, and I sailed my laser an awful lot as well. And so that to run a big boat and a program for someone else was becoming very demanding, and work. We had to get right back into work because things had picked up in our industry a little bit, and so that was great. And so we do all of the sailing, but not every Saturday. So most of the crew, the Sydney Hobart crew will come and do Flinders Island, they'll do Cabbage Tree Island, they'll do the Southport, and we did the Rolex Trophy, of course. So plenty of sailing, but mostly Cat 2 and Cat 1 sailing.
So they're all ready for it, were they?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, I must say, I don't know how other boats fared this year, but I reckon at about 3 or 4 o'clock on the first morning, it was very rough and very bumpy, and we don't have a lot of seasickness on the boat, but we had plenty. I went down and there were people sharing sick bags, there were people sharing buckets, there was 2 of them wrapped around the toilet. And it was funny because there was only 2 of us on deck, but most of the people to windward downstairs, but they were scattered everywhere, and I thought, this is day one. Anyway, obviously the next morning the sun came out, the sea smoothed, and by midday everyone's chomping into oranges and apples and strawberries and making cups of tea and fresh brewed coffee, and we're back on track.
All right, now let's talk about your plan of action for the race. Now, the Weather Bureau, who did you listen to? Do you have your own weather people, or do you? Yeah,
all of the above. All of the above. Look, I mean, I'm an absolute fan of the Bureau of Meteorology. They are fantastic. Ken Batt, who's a very good personal friend, and I've been privileged to do two Sydney Hobarts with Ken Batt. So we look at the bomb, and we look at everything they've got. I also engage Roger Badham, who's a good friend. I worked with Roger when we did the America's Cups. He's done many America's Cups. I've only done one. But he was fantastic, lovely guy, and a real genius. And also Andrew Buckland again. Bucko's a very capable yachty, and he's got opinions. And so we mull all those together, and of course we come to the CYCA briefing. So with the weather, we listen to everybody, and then we download our own information. Obviously, once we get going, we've got expedition on the boat, which is, I don't know a lot about it, but the navigator does, Jennifer does all that. And we download the group files and overlay this with the tide. And so we came up with a pretty good strategy, and the overwhelming strength was probably going to be a small boat race. The word on the street was 40 foot. Well, we fit smack bang right into the 40-foot bracket. We're probably a slower 40-footer than a fast. Like Hoodspar's a really fast 40-footer, really fast. And Ariel is a really nice, beautiful Beneteau. Very good boat, very popular. I think there were 7 Beneteaus in the race. So for us to even have a chance of winning, we had to beat the Beneteaus. And also the Sydney 38s. The Sydney 38s are a fast 38-footer, and we're a very slow 43-footer. So you put all that into the mix, and yeah, it's going to be a 40-foot race. Yeah, hello, game on. It was a lot of work. Whereas if it had been a 70-foot boat race, no one we would have just charged on down there. We still would have had this massive, intense fight with 10 or 12, probably more, 15 boats that are all capable for a 40-footer to win.
Well, the start of the race this year was unusual because it had 3 starting lines.
Yep. Yep.
All the coverage, of course, was on what was happening up the front with Comanche, and it's 4 minutes 34 seconds out of the heads.
Really? I didn't know that. Yeah. I haven't had a chance to. I guess we dwell in the bits that we can see, and I did hear that there was a quick trip out.
Yeah, 4:34.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, you should have seen it. It was sensational.
Yeah. Well, we had it'd be interesting, without harping back to the little boats. We had a pretty quick trip down.
I was going to say what happened on the third line.
Yeah, well, the third line was pretty hotly contested. There was a couple of bigger boats, I don't know, maybe bigger PHS boats. But we got a really good start. We were quite aggressive and we hit the line with speed. We put the code 0 up, which we could have maybe put a small spinnaker, but marginal. And we charged into the tail end of the Division 2 boats. The second line boats.
Yeah.
And then but the beautiful was there was a little buffer of about 4 boat lengths by the time we got there. And then, of course, the beautiful thing for us was that the third line went to the white mark. So we rounded just behind Ariel and the Goat and Zen, so we were really excited about that. But we could put a little chip in, just a little 5 boat length chip, and lay up to the white mark, whereas they also had to follow the leader. So that about 15, 20 minutes into the race, we're all bedded down, we cleared all the marks, and Ariel, who I believed was our hottest competition, because they're very well sailed, beautiful boat, and they did end up third, not to take anything away from the Goat and Zen and Love and War and all those Millennium, many, many other beautiful boats, Hotspur and Not a Diamond, Concubine, all good boats. And they crossed 3 boat lengths behind us, and we thought, this is a sign. So, great start, loved it. And for the people that had never done a Sydney Hobart, like Lisa and Sam and Andrew, they were just amazed. Unbelievable, the people, the boats, the white water. Really exciting, really, really exciting.
All right, so you're at the heads, it comes dark, you're getting the southerly.
Getting sick.
Getting sick. So what was the first night like? Was it?
Well, look, for us, it was really kind of good. It was not free sheets at all. It was hard on the wind. Now, having said that, the further back in the fleet you were, I think the less hard on the wind we were. I believe the big boats like Comanche and Wild Oats 11, they had to chip out. Now, I think Matt Allen on Ichiban might have had to chip out, and Ray Roberts might have chipped out. But we laid through just. And it was quite interesting. We're all fresh in our minds with Nico and Team Vesta Wing going up on the beach. Anyway, our ley line took us right over the shallows of Sir John Young Banks. Now, if you look on the chart, it says dangerous in southeasterly weather, and you drill down, it says dangerous in southeasterly weather. So we're saying, this is southeasterly, is it dangerous, what's the depth? And so but we didn't want to tack, because every minute we tacked was time lost. So we drilled down and we got the thing. We went over probably one of the shallowest parts, and now in our imagination we could feel the waves building up, and there was 1 or 2 little rollers, but nothing untoward. So we went, phew. Now we got there, and then it started to lift us, so we freed up. So apart from the seasickness, it was great. We had 1 reef in the main, and number 4, the boat was doing. As soon as we could put the bow down to 30, 32 apparent, we were doing 7.74s, 7.4 knots. Really good. So we're going nearly as fast as that 10 or 12 boats that we really wanted to do. And as previously shown in the years before, that wasn't bad sailing for us against some of the bigger boats. We're doing 7.4s, they're doing 10s. We're still in the mix. So that was a great night sailing. And I believe the CYCA tracker, when the sun came up, we were on top of the tracker. Now, the tracker's a wonderful tool. It's only a tool, it's a guide, of course, but at least somewhat. If you never get another day in the race, if you've been on top of that tracker, everyone will notice. Now, I've been privileged enough to do quite a few Sydney to Hobarts, and 15 years ago, 20 years ago, a little boat like Wild Oats, Wild Rose would say, oh yeah, we were doing well, and they go, oh yeah, like hello. But now, because it's there, it's wonderful. And so, and a lot of boats get to sit on top of that for various reasons during the race. So pretty excited.
So day two, what happened on day two? Where after the sun came up and started to abate?
Yeah, well, it abated pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We went to jib tops, then I think we went to code zeros, and then it got lighter and the sun came out, and I think we drifted around.
Staying close to the shore?
No, look, a plan was not to be in. The plan that Jennifer had us and Roger Badham and all these people was there was a current line to get back out to the 100 fathom line. So even when it got light and shifty, we kept punching out, well, punching's not the word, but drifting out to get to that 100 fathom line to pick up the current. Now, we did that aggressively, and I think that probably helped because a few boats inshore didn't do quite as well, and there was only one or two, like Papillon, that were outside us, and Zen did well outside us. And so, but then we got to half-ounce spinnaker, and then we started running nicely, and they're the sort of pictures you don't show everybody because the sun's out and everyone's basking and drying their wet weather gear and just having a wonderful, classic, beautiful running day, in the Sydney to Hobart, which is a reaching race, or running and reaching predominantly, and very complex though, unlike around the world race. So that was perfect, and then by nightfall we had a fresher breeze and it was quite nice. We were running, not full tilt, but we were running quite pressured, and I believe that we ran down a bit on the bigger boats. I haven't had a chance yet to sit and look at the tracker, and I will go over it and over and over it, but I believe from some of the information we were getting that we weren't losing distance on the big boats. But
well, they fallen into a hole. That's when Wild Oats went round Comanche. Yeah.
Yes. Look, I mean, the wonderful complexities of the Rolex Sydney to Hobart race can never be underestimated, because you've got to sail your group of boats and you just hope what else is happening, because we never could control, what Ichiban's doing or Vitois or Patrice. We've got no control. Even Hoodspar's gone, but it's a 40-footer. And I think that's wonderful because you still get involved and immersed. You've got to. There's an old saying, you can't win the Rolex Sydney to Hobart unless you win your division. So that was our first aim, and that's the sort of bit you can control a little bit. So that night was lovely running, and then we ran into this amazing cigar of current. Now, it was forecast, it was on the computers, it was free for everybody to see, but we and Ariel and Concubine and Zen and the Goat and Love and War and these 10 or 15 boats that I keep repeating because, they're the boats we had to beat. We all got in this current like 3 knots, which is fantastic, because if we're doing 9 knots plus 3 knots and Patrice is doing 17 knots plus 3 knots, the percentage gain to us is double. And I mean, Ichiban's doing more, and Wild Oats 11's probably doing 30 knots or something. Unbelievable. So 3 knots extra to them drop in the ocean, but when you're as slow as we are, it's fantastic, absolutely. And the sea was nice, and it was just a beautiful night. And the next day was fantastic. We had Ariel, Concubine, we're all in sight. We'd jibe, they'd jibe, we'd get headed. It was just like a day race, and Tasman Island was still 300 odd miles away. Great sailing, and then it got fresher and fresher, and then just in the evening we had a little whoopsie. We're running on Wild Rose, we're running A-sails, asymmetrical spinnakers, but with the spinnaker pole. And because the spinnaker pole's so short and the boat's so dreadfully slow, jibing them isn't just as, like when you see Balance or the yacht Balance, in balance, with balance, doing a jibe, it's just poetry. But for us, you've got to get the pole down, you've got the tack line, it's all messy, it looks pretty dreadful. And so we tore the spinnaker, nothing to do with the sail. I mean, the sailmaker had done a fantastic job, but the clip must have punched it. So we lost our big, strong sail. So luckily the breeze freshened a bit. But during that night down off Flinders Island, it got a little light. So we'd go to the lighter spinnaker, then it'd get too fresh, so we'd go back to the heavier spinnaker, back to the light, so that happened about 6 times during the night. And the tension, because you don't want to blow the light weather spinnaker out, but you know that the other spinnaker is not as big as the one that you had. Anyway, but that made an interesting night. I think Ariel and Zen just got a bit of a jump, but we were still kind of close enough. And so that was that night, and the next morning, wow.
Well, that's when it all happened, isn't it?
You could say that's when it all began.
Well, tell us all about that happen. What happened then?
Well, look, we were kind of happy the breeze had freshened. It was gusting 28, you know, in the day, maybe 25, 26. And we had our 3A up, which is a 3A spinnaker. It's not a full-size spinnaker, but it's powerful. It's got a long luff, and it was ideal for the weather, absolutely ideal. So we were absolutely honking along and just in beautiful control, I guess. And then we got a little gust, a couple of gusts came in, and the seaway changed a little bit. But I've got to say, for a 40-foot boat, a slow 40-foot boat, the wave train down the east coast of Tasmania is perfect. Now, if you're on Ichiban doing 25 knots, you've got a lot of issues. If you're on Scarlet Runner doing 20 knots, you've got issues. But if you're on a big old little slow boat, because the waves are steep and fairly short, it's like heaven. When Chris Bose took Rainbow 2 to winning her Sydney to Hobart, the same wave train, when we were on Thirlmere, when we were in Atara, and it's absolutely perfect because we're too slow to charge into the wave in front, but we're just fast enough to catch the odd wave. So it's absolutely champagne sailing for us in an old slow boat in those conditions. Anyway, but then when it kicks in, you get a 35 knot gust. The boat's so fat it twists, and so we had a little whoopsie. We broached, which is not a big deal. Broaching on that boat isn't a big deal because the old big rudder, the keel is the original IOR keel. It's this long and this big. So you just lay on your side and flap, and then chuff, 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 and off you go again. Now, Sydney 38 or a FAR 40 can't do that because they just can't get enough lateral resistance under the water to get going. So we lay on our side for about a minute, and I thought, so I went up on deck, and I said to Pete, look, we'll just drop the brace forward. This is really windy, because you notice how much more wind you've got. And then we broke a linkage in the steering gear. Now, that was a real nuisance because there was a triangle that goes between the webbing and the lacing. So that broke. So we had no steering. So, emergency steering. So the emergency steering came up. Well, of course, once the steering went, the boat sort of turned around and got head to wind as we dropped the sail in the water, gathered that up pretty quickly, and we ended up, I think, turning around and sort of starting to go backwards a little bit. So the rudder went like this. I hadn't thought of that, so I plonked the steering gear in, and I've got the steering gear at right angles. I'm thinking, this is really weird. So the rudder's sticking out of the beam to go forward. So, okay, we got this. So we got it going, 4 knots, 6 knots, 8 knots, right to granny. We grannied, got it going, and off we're heading to Tasman Island, about 8 or 12 knots. Meanwhile, Daniel Williams, one of our crew, terrific young lad. He'd already fixed we'd just done away with this triangular thing and laced the lacing through the webbing. He said, steering gear's good. Righto, so we took the emergency steering gear and put that down. So, right, what sail next? So we're getting 34, 35 knots. So we put a 4S, which we'd had on the boat for about 2 years. It's a really nice short sail that we had built locally. And it had done a bit of sailing, but not a lot. Anyway, we were that for about half an hour. We were on fire. Once again, the whole wave train thing, the 34, 35, 38 knots was fantastic. But then we got this gust of 37 knots, and the boat did actually go down. Didn't bury the nose, but, you know, and it just went poof, and it blew out in the head, which, you know, is probably a good thing that it would, not that it did. Anyway, so we got that down, and, you know, what next? So we thought, right, got to keep this pedal down because this is our chance, because by this stage we're about 15 miles from Tasman Island. We knew Hutzbar was there but hadn't finished. We knew Love and War was coming in. We could see Ariel. We couldn't see the Goat, but we knew where they were, Zen. And we knew that Ichiban had finished, Patrice, you know, all the Glamours, those beautiful new boats that we just dream of. They'd all finished, and we had plenty we could nearly paddle home. That's not quite true, but we knew that all things being equal, we'd have a fair run. So we wanted to finish. We didn't want to do anything stupid. So we went to put this bigger 3A up again. And it's only a new sail, and once again, with the slow boat, you couldn't hoist the sail on the prodder because the centre of effort of the sail, if it sets, is too far aft, you just broach. So we wanted to set it up on the pole, And you can see by the footage it goes up and it goes up, and then it heavily wooled, and it goes round the forestay a little bit. So I poke the bow up to get it back round the forestay, poles up, it's ready to go. And I said to the helm, to the trimmer, no sheet, we've got to get this to the masthead and we've got to be settled. And of course it goes up, 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 no sheet. The wind was 34 to 35 knots on the dial, maybe 30, and solid 30 regardless of what the dial was saying. Poof, it set, no sheet. It was out here and just went, massive Chinese. And it's the first Chinese that I think I've done in a yacht. Very scary. The boom comes across, and the boat was on its ear so much, the keel was out of the water, and the three crew that were on the windward side are now up to here in water, on or in the fence. And the boat was only doing sort of 3 or 4 knots. Life jackets blowing up, and so oh my goodness! So we thought, head count. We're all here. Everyone's safe here. 4 people down below. Right, the spinnaker pole's flailing around out there, and it looked dreadful, and it was dreadful because we're thinking, oh, what the hell? You look up at the mast, and it's shaking a bit, but it's steady. So he said, right. And a couple of people have said, Hicko, you were asking to let the brace go, and it was on the leeward side, whereas the brace is usually on the windward side. But when you're setting an A sail up with the spinnaker pole, you have both braces going to the tack. And the leeward brace was sort of, so it didn't have too much slack. That's why we're saying let the brace go. So we let the brace go, let the whole thing flow to get the spinnaker pole away from the boat, because we didn't want to get anyone hurt. And as it was, one guy had a bit of blood coming, and we thought, oh, so right, you downstairs. And Dr. Phil Warburton was off watch, and he's been a GP and a surgeon for years, so he looked at him, and in fact Jackie's a physiotherapist, so she stuck some bandage around, and you all right? Yeah, and the concussion rule. It wasn't AFL
What
football.
day is it?
AFL football, yeah. I want to get back up there. No. So that when we just dropped the sail in the water, the boat's only doing 3 knots or so, and it didn't actually all go in the water. We retrieved it, put the pole on, grannied again, because by this stage we're heading the wrong direction, and took a breather. Right, and all of this is about 12 minutes, according to the navigator. She said, from the first 12 minutes off we go again. What now? So we were as James Bond says, we were shaken but not stirred, or we were stirred and we'd had the shit beaten out of us. And so we thought, right, we'll play it cool. So we put the number 4 jib up, because we were getting gusts of 38 knots. So after about 10 minutes of that, not enough, so we put the code 0, and the code 0 on the prodder was okay. We were still doing 12, 13 down the waves. We had to poke the bow up a bit. But Tasman Island was only half an hour away. So we smoked into Tasman, and then and we had a bit of respite. It was easy sailing. It was 30, 35 knots. We had one gust of 40, but with that boat, with that rig and those waves are beautiful for that boat, that size boat. We got to Tasman Island, went round Tasman Island, rain, hail, 40 knots of wind, couldn't see Tasman Island. It was only, like 1 minute you'd see it, the next minute you couldn't. Got round the corner, sun came out, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I said, you got to be kidding. And of course then you start to think, right, we've had all the breaks, we've had all the luck, we've milked everything, and here we are. This has happened to me before, and it's happened to everybody. It's happened to Sid Fisher. Tasman Island to the finish is a whole different race. So we put the half-ounce spinnaker up. It's a 1.5, but we'll call it. We put the light with the spinnaker. Then we went to the code 0. Then we went to the light jib. Then we went back to the drifter. Then we headed due south to get away from the cloud, the land. Boats were coming round behind us, going up, rail down. There were boats over there, rail down. So then we went rail down. We went to the change down. So we got to the rail, which seemed like an eternity, but it was probably only 20 minutes longer than perhaps it would have been to feel like an eternity. So we got round the rail, went back with the light spinnaker, we went with the code 0. Then we heard gusts of 60 knots in the Derwent, and we're going like, where's all this? But then over in the west, over on Bruny Island, Cape Queen Elizabeth, was the darkest, thickest roll cloud that I've seen this year, or last year. It was a real doozy. And then, of course, they were still getting gusts of 60 knots in the Derwent. So everyone was on deck, ready to go, because we had the 0 and a light spinnaker. And then the breeze came in, went to the 4 with the reef, and then we could see this white water up ahead, up around Wedge Island and Bruni Island, Betsy Island. So we put the 5 up and got the second reef ready. Didn't eventuate. It was just the sun on the... but because of these recorded winds, and so then it was back to the 4, back to the full main, back to the 0. The breeze came in at 40 knots. We had that for 25, 30 minutes, which was good because we were moving. And then we heard Love and War come around the corner and we were going, right, okay, that's okay. He was 20 miles. Then, of course, we heard the tragedy of the plane going down. Like, oh, no. And, of course, we heard that it was Richard Bennett. Now, I know, I'm a Tasmanian, Richard Bennett, great Tasmanian, and so tragedy that a plane had gone down, but when it was someone you really knew. So I guess for the next 30 minutes, we didn't actually think too much about, our selfish desires to win this great race. But anyway, that all eventually helped, the boats there, and so we got going, and then it went light again, and we got to the Derwent light, and we had the 0 up, it's in 5 knots of breeze. Then we got whacked with 40 knots again, up past Black Rock, got light, watching the time. We were drifting back, we were all filtering back. So what had about 2 hours on Hotspur became an hour, and then it was 50 minutes. We go, oh no, this is... So we got to the Derwent light, and there was the John Garrow light, and the breeze settled down, 15, 18 knots, maybe gusts to 25, and we did 27 tacks, because 2.5 knots of current, and we tacked, because it's on a local kid there, we're tacking in, tacking out, tacking, and Fletcher was watching us from the Grand Chancellor saying, oh, you'll tack now, the pressure, bang, we tacked. So we got in there and we thought, we knew that we'd beaten Hotspur, and we thought, right, that's all we can do. And then we just enjoyed the ambience, we enjoyed the going past the taste. There's probably 2,000 people at the Taste of Tasmania, all clapping and cheering, and then we went into the marina, and then we went into Constitution Dock, where we hadn't been. The last time we were in Constitution Dock was in 1993 when we'd won the George Adams Tattersalls Trophy in 1993 in Wild Oats. So we went back into there, and the families and the scallop pies and the champagne, because Peter Inchbold's wife was down there and she bought a box of scallop pies and every friends, because of Sailor's Return. So we just settled in and enjoyed and watching the time, of course. And we were wondering that with Love and War getting redressed, obviously, because they'd gone to someone's aid, and time was slipping back. And so around midnight we thought, let's go to bed. We were wasted. It had been a huge day sailing, but we were all pretty happy. But, you're a bit numb. To win a Rolex City to Hobart yacht races, it's a desire and it's a passion and you want to do it, but you know how lucky you've got to be. And then you're a bit numb, you think, like you hear it, to pinch yourself. It's kind of like winning the World Series in the cricket or the baseball or winning the AFL Grand Final. And for us as yachties. And so, but the next morning at about 9:30, I think the protest committee had heard the redress, and Commodore John Cameron rang us and said, "It's official. You are now the 70th edition winner, Wild Rose." So, and then we had lunch and interviews and media, and just were so full of the atmosphere, and it was a lovely day, thank goodness.
Well, that's excellent. So what's your feeling about the whole race? Was it your best?
Well, I can answer that in a couple of different ways. From a club's perspective, I think it was a grand event. It was really a grand event. I mean, the magnificence of Perpetual Oil and Comanche and Ragamuffin and Wild Oats 11 and if I missed one, Rio 100. What a turnout! Nowhere in the world do you see that. So let's tick that box. And then you've got those magnificent prestige boats, like Ray Roberts' boat and Matt Allen's Itchy Barn and Kirby's and Daryl Hodgkinson and Pretty Fly, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And so the glamour and the colour of having those, and then so that the event was just fantastic. it captured the imagination. The race was tough. It had a tough first day, it had a nice bit of calm. It was a classic, complex Rolex Sydney to Hobart. Now, whether it was the Ampol Sydney to Hobart or the Caltex or the Hitachi or the Telstra, same race, never changes. But so from a sponsor's perspective or a marketing perspective, it was fantastic because it had a bit of everything. For Wild Rose, for Roger Hickman, for Bob Oatley, I know that he was ecstatic that his big boat won, but he rang me, Bob Oatley rang me and said, Roger, I am so happy, congratulations, I'm so proud, I'm so happy now. So for Roger Hickman, for all of the crew on Wild Rose, for all the extended family, for Bob Oatley, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of people that have sailed on that boat that have fond memories of it. I don't know anyone that doesn't have fond memories of Wild Oats. For us, it was fantastic. It was a dream come true. People say we were the people's choice. You know, we were a Corinthian bunch of eclectic yachties. It was absolute. And what's been pleasing for me is that a lot of people seem to be just ecstatic for the boat and for the sport, because Love and War won 10 years ago, which is a wonderful boat. You know, Vitoit's a wonderful boat, and Wild Oats 11's a wonderful boat. But someone rang me, an old Tassie mate of mine, and he said, you know, it gives us hope. All those people out there with older boats, with a bit of passion, it gives them hope. And the Rolex Sydney to Hobart yacht race, because it is in itself is an eclectic bunch of boats. You've got older boats, you've got beautiful new boats, you've got new boats that aren't sailed so well, you've got old boats that are sailed well. And we've got this front end to die for, you know, the maxis and that, the top end. Any boat, any race in the world would die to have that leverage. But you know what, those guys kind of like all of us lot, because they make up 10 or 12 and we make up another 100. So it's a beautiful balance. It's a beautiful balance, and I think that's the magic. You know, and it's such a historic race, the tradition of the race. I mean, Margaret Rintoul was out there, Spirit of Coomaloo. There were quite a lot of boats in their 40s and 50s. And for them to have a crack, to him to have a chance, and that's why the George Adams Tattersalls Trophy, I think, is for this particular race is so precious. And yeah, we were stoked, absolutely stoked.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roger. That was great.
Oh, my pleasure.